The great Nile River flows through the heart of Egypt, providing vitality for one of the world's greatest ancient civilizations. This civilization is known for its pyramids and the Sphinx, but also for its unique and beautiful irrigation systems, important literary traditions, complex religions, and those prominent dynasties. In the legends of the ancient Egyptians, there was a wise king named Osiris, who was envied by his brother Set, who killed him and threw his body into 13 pieces into Osiris's wife Isis searched everywhere, brought these pieces back, and put them together, weeping. Isis's true feelings moved the gods, so she became pregnant and gave birth to Osiris's posthumous son, Horus. So who is Horus? How did he become king? Who are the pharaohs? And who built the pyramids? Let's uncover the secrets of ancient Egypt together. Horus grew up vowing to avenge his father and eventually defeated his uncle Set to become the new king, and the deceased king Osiris also became the king of the dead. After his death, he was mummified and conquered death. Death was resurrected and became the god of the afterlife. His son, Horus, became the god of the living. So in fact, Osiris was originally a king. Later, because he conquered death, he became a god, the god of the afterlife. In the minds of the ancient Egyptians, the king was Horus while alive and became Osiris after death. The succeeding king became the new Horus. This cycle continues to maintain the divine order on earth. The king is the agent of the gods on earth, has divinity, and holds the supreme status. The king's rule may be interrupted due to natural or man-made reasons, but eventually a new king will restore the throne and restore order. This concept of kingship runs through the history of the ancient Egyptians. In the classification of ancient Egyptian books, gods belong to the heavenly realm, people belong to the earthly realm, and the dead belong to the underworld. The king belongs to all three worlds at the same time. In Egypt, the pharaoh is a hybrid of man and god, considered a divine monarchy. People believe that they have divine blood flowing in their bodies, and this divine lineage is passed down through the female line of the family. Therefore, only the eldest son of the king's legitimate wife can inherit this divine lineage and continue to pass it on in the future. He is actually the intermediary between the ancient gods and humans. He can communicate with the gods and with the people. Therefore, he is a hybrid of man and God. The history of ancient Egypt began in 3100 BC and ended in 332 BC. The Egyptian priest Manetho, who lived in the 4th to 3rd centuries BC, divided Egyptian history into 31 dynasties, which is also the historical analysis method used by modern scholars. In the Neolithic Age, Egypt was still in the early village life, and there were two major dynasties, one in the Nile River basin of Upper Egypt, and the other in the Delta region of Lower Egypt. The prehistoric period of Egypt is called the pre-dynastic period, that is, the first and second dynasties. In the late pre-dynastic period, royal power appeared regionally, and culture gradually tended to unify. The famous Narmer palette and the scorpion mace head are the most important witnesses. The Narmer palette is not a small palette for grinding, making obviously it is a ritual when it has very beautiful scenes, actually representing a major event in Egyptian history, showing the king wearing the crown of Upper Egypt, the so-called white crown, conquering the delta. So it actually depicts the two parts of the country, Upper Egypt Lower Egypt, the Nile River region, and the Delta unified. On the other side, he wears the crown of Lower Egypt, this so-called red crown. The king wears the white crown and the red crown. It is itself a historical document of unification, the first unification of Egypt around 3000 BC. The text that appeared on the Narmer palette became a fixed technique, becoming a fixed rule that has been used for thousands of years. The 3rd to 8th dynasties are the Old Kingdom period, when Egypt finally completed and consolidated political unity and autocracy, and royal power was very developed. The Egyptian pyramid, known as one of the 7 wonders of the world, is a symbol of the strong royal power during this period and the highest embodiment of material civilization development. Therefore, the Old Kingdom period is also called the Pyramid Age. The first to build a pyramid as a tomb was Djoser of the 3rd dynasty. It is said that its stepped pyramid was designed by a person named Imhotep, who was later regarded as the god of medicine by the Egyptians. Despite the brilliant progress and achievements of the 3rd dynasty, the 4th dynasty was a golden age of strong royal power in Egyptian history, during which the 3 most famous pyramids were built in the suburbs of Giza: Sneferu, Khufu, Khafre, and Menkaure. They are the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 5th kings of the 4th dynasty, respectively. They are 4 generations of the same family. That is to say, Sneferu is the father of Khufu, Khufu is the father of Khafre, and the son of Khafre is the next king, Menkaure. In later folklore, we know that Sneferu was a very ideal king. There are several pieces of evidence. One is that people he called his subjects brothers and friends. Another piece of evidence is that in the Sinai Quarry inscriptions, this king was regarded as a god by later people, later craftsmen. And Khufu and Khafre are seen as tyrants in the minds of later people. The most important piece of evidence is that Herodotus mentioned in his history that Khufu, in order to build his pyramid, let his daughter sell her body to get the stone blocks needed for the pyramid. Menkaure's image is a sentimental work, mentioning that a prophet told him his days were numbered, and the king did not sleep at night, wanting to enjoy every moment of this life. The fortune of this dynasty also gradually declined. In 2160 BC, the golden age of Egyptian history came to an end. There are many reasons for the decline of the Old Kingdom, caused by a variety of reasons. The first is natural disasters caused by low Nile water levels. The second is the development of local forces that created a strong centrifugal force against the government. There is also the interruption of foreign trade. In addition, there is a reason that the last king of the 6th dynasty, Pepi II, ruled for a very long time. He ruled for more than 90 years. This king succeeded at the age of 9 and lived to be more than 100 years old, always being a king. So his long-term rule caused various social problems. Ancient Egyptian production technology has always been relatively backward, especially compared to the neighboring Western Asia. For example, Western Asia has had a very developed irrigation system for a long time, and Egypt has been using the most primitive basin irrigation method for a long time. Another simple water-lifting tool, the shadufay, appeared in Egypt only in the 18th dynasty, that is, in the 16th century BC. In addition to these problems, the Egyptian dynasty also experienced division and chaos caused by wars. Kings who ascended the throne as local nobles always faced the threat of strong local noble forces, They had to take a proactive attitude and take a series of effective measures to develop the economy and consolidate their power. Therefore, the kings of this period also showed a different style from the Old Kingdom period. King Amenhotep, the first of the 12th dynasty, was the first to establish the co-regency system, where the former presided over domestic affairs in the palace, and the prince, as the heir, was the supreme military commander, leading the army to guard in the event of the king's death or assassination in a civil unrest. The prince, who held military power, could immediately succeed to the throne and quickly stabilize the situation. Amenhotep seemed to have foresight, preparing for his own potential misfortune. He was later murdered. In the education of his son Sesostris I, created by later generations, we hear the sighs of a deceased king filled with vicissitudes. Those who wear the fine clothes I gave are harboring illicit thoughts, and those who use the myrrh I bestowed are secretly discontent. Beware of the conspiracies of lowly ministers, which are unknown to others. Do not trust a brother, do not know a friend, do not make a confidant, for it is useless. When you lie down, be careful on your own, for there are no followers in days of danger. This is a ruler filled with a sense of worry rather than a king cloaked in divinity. In the royal statues of this period, the personality of the king began to emerge, breaking the previous perfect, rigid, and majestic pattern. The most typical is the portrait of Sesostris III, depicting an aged, worried monarch with sunken eyes, a gaunt face, and two deep wrinkles at the corners of his mouth, showing the heavy burden on a successful monarch's heart. Despite internal conflicts, the real blow that led to the dynasty's demise came from the outside. Due to the invasion of the Hyksos from Western Asia, the Middle Kingdom came to an end. About 100 years later, the rulers of the 17th dynasty from Thebes and southern Egypt expelled the Hyksos from Egypt. Egypt then entered a period of expansion and empire development. The empire expanded northeast to Syria and Palestine, and south to Nubia. During this period, the ideal monarch was a hero on the battlefield and a wise man in foreign affairs. Many kings of the Thutmose family of the 18th dynasty and the Ramesses family of the 19th dynasty were distinguished by their military achievements. Pharaoh is the title of the king of Egypt, originally referring to the place where the royal family lived, just like the ancient Chinese referred to the emperor as Your Majesty, both evolving from place names. From the New Kingdom onwards, pharaohs began to appear as military heroes. Their personal talents and military achievements were dramatically exaggerated. During the 18th to 19th dynasties, Egypt engaged in an on and off century-long struggle for supremacy with the Hittites. The Hittites were located in what is now Turkey, and the grievances between Egypt and the Hittites had a long history, until one of the most famous pharaohs in Egyptian history, Ramesses II of the 19th dynasty, finally resolved the dispute with the Hittites. This process took 16 years with both fierce warfare and complex diplomatic strategies. The Battle of Kadesh in 1274 BC was the largest encounter. In 1259 BC, Egypt and the Hittites finally concluded a peace treaty stipulating permanent friendship, non-aggression, mutual defense alliance, mutual extradition of fugitives, and so on. This was the first truly equal treaty in human history. The establishment of the empire also brought significant changes to Egypt's social structure. This was the increasing power of the priestly and military classes, and the contradictions with the royal power eventually evolved into conflict, namely Akhenaten's religious reform. Akhenaten's new religion had two main contents. One was to prohibit the worship of gods other than Aten, and the other was to establish a new, simplified worship ritual, abolishing all the red tape of traditional religion. The image of the Aten god is a sun disk. The sun god may be one of the most important deities in Egypt. It has existed from the beginning of Egypt's educational history and became particularly prominent around the 5th dynasty, around 2500 BC. The sun god is important because Egypt is a country that depends on the sun. Egypt has almost 365 days of sunshine a year, and there may only be 1 or 2 cloudy or rainy days. When the sun disappears in Egypt, the Egyptians would feel something is wrong because their lives are entirely dependent on the sun. When the sun rises, the light begins, and the activities of the whole day also begin. When the sun sets, everything seems to die. They have noticed this from the beginning of civilization. The sun and the night are the two main elements that truly affect the Egyptians, and they are the main forces that help the development of the entire Egyptian civilization. The worship of the sun god is not hard to understand because the Egyptians can see the sun every day. The sun awakens them, and when the sun sets, they go to sleep. The regularity of the sun and the night is so strong that even seasonal changes are predictable. The geographical regularity of Egypt is amazing. You can predict what tomorrow will be like, what the next season will be like, and how life will be. Therefore, in Egypt, the worship of the sun culture for daily and expected things has emerged. Due to breaking free from the control of traditional religions, a new style emerged in the cultural field, known as the Amarna style. It is manifested in architecture by striving to simplify the structure of temples, as people can more directly feel the irradiation of Aten's light in open-air courtyards. In sculpture and painting, it is manifested in two aspects. One is the depiction of family life themes, and the other is a naturalistic expression that is quite different from traditional art. That is, capturing the moment expressions and movements of characters and a special image pattern. Akhenaten and his family and subjects were all depicted with long faces, wide foreheads, thick lips, narrow shoulders, and large abdomens. Some people believe this is a form of realism, the appearance of Akhenaten himself. In fact, this style has a deeper meaning, that is, a complete separation between the images of gods and humans. Traditional Egyptian art personalizes the image of gods and perfects the image of humans. Therefore, it is difficult to distinguish between the images of gods and humans. After Akhenaten simplified the image of the god to a visible sun disk, he also presented the king and his family life in a new way, using these artworks as objects of worship for his subjects. This is both a new attempt to explore the expression of abstract concepts in specific forms and a blatant display of personal worship. Behind the warm family life scenes and the personalized image of the king is the supreme authority of the son of Aten. The Amarna style is also manifested in literature by advocating the movement of spoken language in writing. This is what contemporary scholars call the rise of Middle Egyptian. Akhenaten's religious reform ended in failure, and his successors quickly restored the old traditions, with the god Ammon making a comeback, and the contradictions between royal power and divine power continued to exist. In the late New Kingdom, the priests of the Ammon temple centered in Thebes even established their own dynasty, competing with the pharaoh's dynasty. Coupled with the invasion of Libyans and Sea peoples, Egypt eventually lost its imperial fortune. The backwardness of production technology was an important reason for Egypt's decline in the later New Kingdom period. During the New Kingdom period, other regions in the Near East quickly entered the Iron Age, and iron smelting was first monopolized by the Hittites. After the 19th dynasty, the Hittites declined and iron smelting technology spread rapidly in the Near East. Egypt's relatively closed geography and culture made it relatively late in accepting these advanced technologies. It can be said that Egypt was the last of the major powers in the Near East to enter the Iron Age. On the other hand, the gold mines that once served as the economic pillar of the Egyptian Empire had been exhausted in the late New Kingdom, causing the pharaohs to lose an important diplomatic trump card, which also directly affected their position as the hegemon in Egypt was a particularly rich country. Its population was at most 2 or 3 million, a large country, surrounded by other countries from an early stage, so it was always the object of everyone's envy, and wealth usually leads to relaxation and laziness. The people around were waiting for an opportunity to enter Egypt, and whenever Egypt became weak, people would attack it. At the end of Egyptian history, every country had occupied Egypt. Egypt was continuously ravaged by foreign invaders and finally became a part of the Macedonian Empire in 332 BC. Each country that occupied Egypt came from different regions, such as Nubia, Iraq, and other areas. Finally, under Greek and Roman rule, Egyptian civilization actually began to decline, because most of the occupations came from the north, and the Egyptians gradually retreated southward until they shrank and mixed with other cultures until Egyptian culture itself almost disappeared. The ancient Egypt exited the historical stage, but the names and stories of the pharaohs have been passed down and influenced generations of later monarchs. From Alexander the Great to Cleopatra, to later Roman emperors, they all admired the world of the pharaohs. Through these and many others, the ancient Egyptian civilization flowed from the Nile to the Mediterranean into a broader world, and was preserved in the convergence with other civilizations